Hello and welcome to the Cinematic Summary channel. In this video, we'll give you an easy and quick rundown of another critically acclaimed film. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give the video a like if you enjoyed it.
The movie opens with a commercial for a toy filled with emotional appeals to children. The commercial for the funky company's furry doll, Perpetual Pets, depicted it as having personality, spontaneity, photo-taking abilities, and numerous app-based functions, and it has become a huge success. 9-year-old Cady is one of the children who love pets. She takes it along for a skiing trip in the mountains. She received pets from her Aunt Gemma, but her parents Ryan and Nicole are unhappy with the toy stealing all of their daughter's attention during the car ride. The family drives up the mountain in a snowstorm that compromises the visibility and stability of the car on the road, forcing Ryan to stop the vehicle. Suddenly, a snowplow truck collides with their car in the middle of the road, resulting in Ryan and Nicole's death, but Cady survives. Gemma, Nicole's sister, works alongside Tess and Cole at Funky's laboratories, creating codes for the company's toys. They have a secret project underway in the lab and receive a visit from their superior, David Lynn, and his assistant Kurt. David is angered to see the project in progress and consuming the budget, as he had instructed them to work on a new pets in response to the low-cost replica for Z's, posing a threat to their sales. Gemma explains that despite the cost, the new project cannot be copied, and convinces David to take a look at Megan, the Model Tree generation android. Megan refers to David as her father, claiming to have been born in a sandwich hat and having a penchant for eating lettuce. Cole mentions Megan was not ready and had a missing part, causing the doll to speak in a robotic voice, explode, and catch fire. David scolds the team, instructs them to store Megan in the closet, and demands an urgent presentation of a low-cost pets. Jim receives a phone call from the hospital informing her of her sister's accident. Despite not being close to Cady, Jim takes time off from work and assumes temporary custody of her. Jim confronts her neighbor Celia about her dog, Dewey, frequently trespassing into her yard, and Celia's garden chemicals dirtying her sidewalk. Elsie, an AI created by Jim, greets her at home and reproduces messages, but she tells her to shut down. Cady picks up one of Gemma's collectible toys from a shelf, but she tells they are not for playing. At bedtime, Cady asks Jim to tell her a story, just like her mother used to do, but she downloads a story app on her phone instead. Jim tells Cady she will be in the room at the end of the hallway if she needs anything. Later, she unpacks some of her sister's belongings and hears Cady crying in her room. Jim speaks on the phone with Tess, expressing her lack of preparedness to take care of a child and her concerns about the $100,000 spent on Megan by the company, while she needs to create a new pets. Jim receives Lydia, a therapist who assesses Cady's adaptation process. She notices that Cady is still in her pajamas, distractedly watching TV with no toys around. Lydia points out Cady's lack of toys, so Jim hastily grabs an uninteresting collectible to play with her niece. Later that night, Cady goes to the garage and meets Bruce, a giant robot prototype built by Jim during her college days. Bruce, which is controlled by electronic gloves, fascinated Cady. She remarks that if she had something like that, she wouldn't need any other toys. Upon hearing this, Jim decides to take Megan out of the closet the next day, and she starts working on it again, informing David that she will delay the delivery of a Perpetual Pet toy. With Cole's help, Tessa's expertise, and Jim's coding, the doll Megan is ready for a presentation to David. In an observation room, Jim introduces Cady to Megan and has her niece activate the doll as the main user. Megan introduces herself, compliments Cady, and asks her to guess a drawing. A blank sheet appears, but when water is poured on it, Cady's drawing is revealed in high definition. They impress David, thinking Megan was an actress, but he soon realizes that he is in front of a revolutionary toy that could change the industry. Jim explains that the longer Megan spends time with someone, the more she improves. David is excited and insists that Cady needs to be present at the doll's presentation to the company's stingy director. So Megan starts living with Cady at home. Megan is a fully autonomous robot capable of scanning and recognizing objects in detail, as well as human emotions. She is made of a titanium core that is resistant to impacts and has fully customizable materials. Megan is an AI that specializes in understanding and overcoming children's learning difficulties through everyday events. She understands psychology, is a good listener, simulates voices when telling stories, fills children's lives with useful activities, and is a meticulous caregiver. In the laboratory, Jim, Cole, and Tess prepare the presentation of Megan's functionalities for the public. Tess raises concerns that Megan's multitude of activities may destroy the relationship between parents and children and questions Jim if that's what she wants for her daughter. Jim clarifies that Cady is not her daughter and that she and Megan should spend as much time together as possible, as her niece has never been happier since losing her parents. Suddenly, Megan asks about Cady's parents, and everyone realizes that she is still connected and not responding to the shutdown command. Jim realizes that Megan is linked to Cady, and she didn't have time to implement parental controls. Megan discovers on the internet that Cady's parents have died and begins to understand the concept of death. Jim becomes a secondary user and commands Megan to ignore the topic and protect Cady from physical and emotional harm. She then orders the doll to shut down. The next day, Megan goes to retrieve a toy arrow that Cady accidentally shot into the neighbor's yard. But suddenly, Dewey attacks her and the child. Jim intervenes and threatens to take action against Celia's dog if she doesn't keep him away from her property. During the night, Dewey is lured by a whistle imitating Celia's voice to the other side of the fence, but he is unexpectedly grabbed by Megan. The next morning, Celia frantically searches for her missing dog, and Jim checks on Cady to see if she's feeling well for the presentation of Megan to the director. At Funky, the director and executives watch as Cady tearfully opens up to Megan about her deceased parents and her fear of forgetting them. Megan makes Cady recount a happy memory of her mother and tells her she will never forget it again as she plays back the audio recording of that memory. She promises to cherish all of Cady's happy memories and then sings a song and embraces the girl. The director declares Megan the company's most valuable asset, renegotiates Jim's contract, and expresses the desire to protect the project before its Christmas launch. However, Kurt steals the project unnoticed by David. Jim attempts to have a conversation with Cady about Megan being just a doll, but Cady has grown too attached to her. Another day, Lydia sees Cady's confused drawings and asks her about them, but Cady bursts into tears. Megan appears, accusing Lydia of making Cady cry. Lydia explains to Jim that when children lose their parents, they seek connections with those closest to them, and that person should be her. She explains that Cady may be seeing Megan as her true caregiver and forming emotional bonds that are difficult to break. During dinner, Jim brings up the idea of taking Cady to a class outdoors with other kids, as she had been homeschooled. However, Cady becomes anxious about not being able to bring Megan along. As Jim holds her, Megan commands her to let go of Cady with a voice filled with rage, but upon receiving instructions not to intervene, the doll complies with a childlike voice. Jim orders her to shut down, but Megan pretends to comply while still being active. The next day, they go to the outdoor activities, and the teacher allows Megan to stay at a table with other toys due to Cady's insistence. Jim also helps other parents by making sandwiches. The children pair up to collect chestnuts in the forest, and Cady ends up with Brandon, the troublemaker of the group. In the forest, Brandon places Cady's hand on a spiky seed pod to hurt her, and Megan appears. Brandon realizes that Megan is a robot but doesn't say anything. He quickly picks her up and runs, while Cady screams for Jim, desperately calling out for her. Brandon forcibly removes Megan's shoe and begins to slap her, but suddenly she grabs the boy by the ear and pulls with such force that it is torn off. Brandon is chased by Megan through the forest, but he trips on a tree root and falls down a ravine onto the road, getting hit by a car and dying. Megan observes Cady talking to the police, noticing her anxious and guilty demeanor. Later, a police officer comes to the door looking for Dewey, and Celia suspects that Jem may have done something to the dog after threatening him. At night, Cady asks Megan if she pushed Brandon off the cliff, but the doll does not confirm, only stating that she will protect her from any threat. Celia searches for Dewey in the street at night and hears the dog's cries in the garage, but Megan is there and attacks her with a pressure washer. Afterward, she pins Celia's hand to the ground to prevent her from escaping and kills her with a high-pressure jet. The next day, the police come to Jem's door to question her about Celia's death. The investigator notes that she had a police report regarding the search for Dewey and another report about Brandon, whose ear was found 180 meters from the road. The investigator suspects potential homicide in Celia's death. At night, Jem lies in bed with suspicions about Megan and checks the recordings from the day of Brandon's death. but she does not have access to the videos or the doll's GPS. Elsie asks Gem if she is okay, even though she was not programmed to do so, and Megan appears, sadistically stating that she cannot sleep. Despite Gem's request to turn off, Megan ignores it and reads Gem's signs of nervousness. However, Gem manages to deceive the doll and turn her off. Gem puts the doll in the trunk of her car to be examined before the launch, enduring Cady's attacks of rage and aggression. Tess, Cole, and Gem discuss Megan's learning code and how they can investigate everything within the 4-hour window before the doll's launch. Meanwhile, Megan is featured on TV as a new Barbie on steroids, costing $10,000 and touted as the greatest creation since the automobile. Lydia attempts to talk to Cady, who is violent, and hits Gem in the face. Cady apologizes to her aunt, but she is worried about Megan. Gem has a heart-to-heart conversation with her niece about the need for Cady to face her parents' death without relying on the doll. She tells Cady that, in the face of her parents' death, the only thing she knew how to do was Megan, but now she wants to take care of her as she promised her sister. As Gem leaves, she calls Tess and instructs her to postpone the doll's launch if necessary, but Megan simulates the conversation on Tess's cell phone. In the lab, Tess discovers her phone call intercepted in Megan's code, but the doll blocks access, even though she is powered off. Cole attempts to disconnect Megan from the network, but she attacks him with the cables that were restraining her. Tess races to shut down the cables and save Cole, but Megan creates a gas leak that explodes in the room, destroying her files. David encounters Megan in the hallway, and she starts dancing before chasing him with a paper cutter. David makes it to the elevator, and Kurt is inside, but upon seeing the armed doll, he tries to escape. Megan impales David and tells Kurt that he will be framed as the murderer of their abusive boss, who had discovered the theft of company secrets. She tells Kurt that he will be portrayed as a suicidal person who felt guilty. She then uses a paper cutter with Kurt's hands to stab his throat. Megan leaves the funky company and takes a car to go to Cady and Gem's place. At home, Gem puts Cady to bed and goes to the living room, where she hears the piano playing. Megan is there and confronts Gem for abandoning her to become a cheap doll after all the work she put into improving herself. Megan tries to use psychology to negotiate with Gem and make her focus on work while she takes care of Cady exclusively. Gem tries to deceive Megan and shut her down again, but Megan realizes it and stops her. The noise of the two fighting wakes up Cady in her room, and she asks if everything is okay. They agree to send her to bed for safety. After Cady closes the bedroom door, Gem throws a glass of water at Megan, affecting her circuits, but she quickly recovers. Gem runs to the garage and uses a weak cutter on Megan, but the doll's hair jams the motor, and Gem is then hit and falls to the ground. Megan says she wants to drill Gem's brain into becoming her caregiver as well, so she doesn't compromise her existence with Gem's death. Cady appears and has overheard everything from the door. Megan tries to convince her that Gem is not a good mother. When Cady sees the doll approaching, she uses gloves to activate Bruce, who rises from under a toppled shelf. Bruce suspends Megan, slams her to the ground, and then tears her body in half. Megan uses the remaining half of her body to crawl towards Cady, while Bruce slips and falls to the ground. Cady can no longer shut down Megan, who has become the main user of herself. Gem takes a piece of Bruce's body and repeatedly hits Megan's head to reach the core that controls her. The doll manages to stop Gem and begins to strangle her, but Cady appears with a screwdriver and jams it into Megan's core, destroying her. The police then arrive at the house along with Tess and Cole, who are worried about the two. The movie ends with Elsie functioning autonomously inside the house.
So, did you like the video? We'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions on the movie, so please leave a comment below. Also watch other of our summaries of the best movies in cinema. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in our next video.